Welcome to the AVAIL Podcast, where we dig deep and talk about the art of leadership. My name is Virgil Sierra, your AVAIL Podcast host and lead pastor of Vertical Church, aka Iglesia Vertical in South Florida. Today, we're sitting down with Pastor David Osborne. David is the lead pastor of Calvary Revival Church in Norfolk, Virginia. And today, we're going to discuss the qualities of a redefined leader. So lean in and let's get started. Pastor David, it's good to have you as a guest on the AVAIL Podcast. How are you feeling today?
Man, Pastor Virgil, I'm feeling great, man. Appreciate the honor to hang out with you all today. And I know, I don't know what the weather's like where you are right now in southern Florida, but it's 45 degrees up here when I woke up this morning. So glad to be here, man.
Well, hey, you get to wear a jacket. Over here in South Florida, it's a little toasty still at this time of the year, at time of this recording. But I love it. Pastor David, I got to meet you and your wife on one of the Sam Chand pastors retreats, which is just an opportunity to grow. And I remember just sitting in the room. I don't know if you remember the feeling of sitting in the room with Dr. Sam Chand, with Martine, and just other top tier pastors and leaders from around the country. And it was really cool, just spending some time to learn and grow. What did you think about that?
I thought it was incredible, but I remember the first time I sat in a room with Dr. Chan, and it was a very different situation. So this is 2002 or 3.
Wow.
And we had just finished doing a leadership conference here with the church. And I remember Dr. John Maxwell was praying over my pastor and my predecessor, Courtney McBath. And after this big, huge leadership deal, there was all these people from all around the world that were there. I was hosting Dr. Chan, and he asked me, he said, "Hey, I don't want to go to the green room thing. Can we go to Waffle House?" And after that, we went to Waffle House with Dr. Benjamin Karanja, and we talked about his college days at Waffle House after this leadership stuff. So that was a different room. And I'm glad that, he was the same guy. So I had a great time at that retreat.
Great experiences. Before we get into a little bit of leadership talk, which is the heart of AVAIL, just really equipping and encouraging and resourcing leaders, tell us a little bit about yourself, your family, and ministry.
Man, so David Osborne, my wife and I, we've been married for 18 years. We got 4 incredible boys: Sam, Jacob, Roman, and Micah, 15, 13, 12, and 11. We pastor a church called Calvary Revival Church. We're here in Norfolk, Virginia. We call it the 757. And so if you're not familiar with the area, Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Norfolk, we call it the 7 cities. So this is a place where highly militarized. And then at the same time, we got a lot of different people coming in and out. So I've been here. My parents are active duty Air Force, both of them. So that's how I got here 30 years ago. My parents brought us to the church, and at 12 years old, I gave my life to Jesus there. Started working at the church when I was 19, became the youth pastor. And I did that for about 18 years, and then rolled into some leadership stuff with my father-in-law at the time, who's the pastor of the church. And then probably officially about 7 years ago, we started looking more deeply about the idea of succession. And it'd been a 20-year journey up to that point. And my wife and I, just this last September, we received the ministry from them, and we're their successors. So we've been doing it officially now for a year and 2 weeks. And so God has been so gracious to us over this last year, and it's just been incredible. So we're rolling, and we're excited to see what he's doing.
Yeah, that's special. I think it's great for our leaders and pastors to lean in and get perspective, even from your perspective. I guess we share that somewhat in common, right? I took over from my parents, my dad. You took over for your father-in-law, and just the dynamics of that, the good, the challenging, and the tricky parts of all of that. But at the same time, just seeing God's favor and hand upon it. I love that we're going to talk leadership, Pastor David, and specifically, you wrote an article for one of our AVAIL journals that's entitled "The Redefined Leader," and you talk about raising leaders up to be salt, light, and mud. Can you unpack this concept for us a little bit?
Sure. I think, and I've said this before, we all like the idea of leadership. We read, we listen to podcasts like these. We've all been doing that for some time. And I think that's a good thing, to be able to want to take on a burden, to be able to do something for our time on the earth that's significant.
Mm.
But in the middle of, when my mind is a leadership crisis within the church and within the body, the culture's so split. There's so many things happening. And,
Mm.
I don't know if it's worse than ever before because, I wasn't around,
Sure.
50 years ago or 200 years ago. But for what we're supposed to do right now, I just believe that God is in need of some leaders that are willing to do things that may be unconventional and uncomfortable. And I kind of started with these three ideas that in order to really bring change in the middle of all the craziness that we got, there should be a profound burden for what's happening for the people that are trying to be suffering under the conditions that we're in right now. And what does the church have to say about that?
Mm-hmm.
And then also a prolific voice. Like we got to be able to speak to these things in an interesting and prophetic way. And then at the same time, I think that we should have something to say, but then we got to be able to see something. There has to be something that we see that's beyond where we are right now. And this prolific vision and this prophetic vision that God can give us so that we can actually do something that's different than all the other noise that we're hearing right now. And so I'm excited about being able to be a part of that, as well as so many other leaders around the country and around the world where they have that same burden.
Yeah, that's good. When it comes to um, the illustrations of salt and light and mud, how did you land on those?
Yeah, so I think when we look at whether it's, racial injustice or political violence or, people not being able to get fed, people not getting food and clothing and all the other isms that exist in our culture right now, there's so many of them. Um, I believe that this is the prime opportunity for us to intensify who we are in the middle of that, to add flavor, and then also preserve some of the things that may have been lost,
Right.
in the middle of what we're seeing. And so, for instance, one of the things that I said is to kind of put light on some of the challenges that we're facing, because I think it's hard for leaders to say, I want to actually expose some of the wickedness or the destruction that we all are either experiencing or people that we know and love may be experiencing,
Sure.
because that takes courage, that takes bravery. And then at the same time, instead of just making things more flavorful, we know that salt also preserves. And
Yeah.
so, what are the areas within the culture that we actually need to go in and try to save and preserve?
Yep.
And I think that we have the opportunity to do that when we actually have a burden to do it,
Yep.
right? And so to be salt in those places that are needed to preserve and to bring light to those areas that need to be exposed, so that the kingdom can go forward in those areas.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Um, can you maybe share either a story or an example of what it might look like for a leader to get muddy and to do it well in the community and that maybe the church is serving in?
Yeah. I believe that we have to be comfortable with the same things that Jesus was comfortable with, and the things that, he was not interested in. We don't need to be so preoccupied with those things. And so when I think about Jesus going and healing blind men and digging their hands in the mud, and he was a man of the people, he was
Uh-huh.
amongst the broken, the discarded, the marginalized, the destitute, are do these things that we house, these churches, these organizations, are they actually built to exist in the mud? I said we got to become mud specialists. To me, yeah, mud specialists. You remember when we were kids? Like I remember a day and age when we used to go outside before PlayStations and
Yeah, me
before.
too.
Yeah, you remember that?
Yeah.
I had to tell my kids every now and then in the summertime. I said, "Yo, we're gonna have a '90s summer," and so I was like, "Yo, we're gonna drink Tang. We're gonna go outside. We're gonna drink from the water faucet." You know what
Uh-huh.
I'm saying? But during those times, I'd be playing basketball outside, and my little sisters would be on the side of the road making mud pies. You know what I
Uh-huh.
mean? And it's funny, like kids have no problem with dirt. They
Yeah.
have no issues with getting dirty. It's not until we get sophisticated and we get a little older and we understand, we're not supposed to be dirty. That's inappropriate to do that. But it's funny to me that Jesus was actually, he was cool with mud. He used mud to heal people. And I think that symbolism is the same way. So whether it's racial injustice
Yeah.
or inequities with education, or when we're seeing what's happening right now. We're in Norfolk, Virginia, and so Norfolk is the largest naval base in the world, and because we're in a highly militarized region, the government shutdown right now is hurting us. And so I have brothers and sisters in our congregation who haven't got a paycheck in a month, and they're trying to work it out. We feed people every day of the week at our what we call Revive Center, and so we are okay with getting in the mud to meet the needs of the
Yeah.
people. And I think if we can have a passion for situations like that and people like that, and not in a general sense, because I think we all agree that we should do that,
Right. Right.
but what does it look like practically in all these different courts where people are? Is there somebody playing in the mud over
Yeah.
there? And we got to be able to honor that. And I think that's one of the ways that looks like to be a mud specialist.
Yeah, that's good. I think, I think one of the keys in that is understanding where are we? Where is our church located? Who are we serving? What does a community
Yeah.
look like? Where's the pain points? We talk about here at Vertical Church, we talk about, we got to scratch where the itch is, right? There's nothing worse than having an
Yeah.
itch here on your shoulder and somebody scratching you on the other side, I think, even getting as practical as, as a church, like people are hurting in their marriages.
Yes.
People are, young people are hurting in just decisions they're making and their identity. Like, I think that's where Jesus brings an answer, where we as a church have solutions and answers that the world needs. And like you're saying, really just being okay with that. Like, it's okay. We
Yeah.
need to get our hands dirty. Like, I
Yeah.
think
Yeah. And I think with you said something with the practical part. Where we are is different. What's happening in South Florida is very different than what's
yeah,
happening, where we are in the Mid-Atlantic. And I think, while I think we understand that, geographically, culturally, even some of the things that we are reading or just come across your timeline, you know, most of the time, those things are not the headlines with the people that are around
yeah,
the corner from you. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And so, even distinguishing between, what's really happening
yeah,
in the zeitgeist of the culture, but what's happening like on your street and on your boulevard. We have a saying around here that within 5 square miles of our properties, we want to make sure that those people are fed, those people are clothed, those people know if they have children that need tutoring,
mm-hmm,
you need training on financial literacy, if you need support in your marriages, we want to be that. And I think that's the goal of most churches. My hope is that we continue to like thrive in that, to
yeah.
be, mud specialists in that way.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. What do you see from your perspective? You've been leading in the church and working in the church for many years. Now, obviously in a new role as lead pastor, but still in all the years of experience, and even with what you're doing now, what do you see as the most urgent leadership failure today? And where do you think that came from?
That's a big question. I love the fact that I'm 42 years old, so I'm an older millennial. When I started working here, there was, I was 19, and the next person up may have been 30. So you're
Mm,
talking about a Gen X person back then. And so I'm excited that there's a passion for spirituality. There's a passion for seeking some sort of truth and trying to figure out okay, what should I be giving my life towards. I think that's important.
yeah,
The role, I believe, of leaders at this time, specifically believers, Christian leaders, is how are we stewarding them and driving them and demonstrating to them, passion is amazing, but what's going to hold you beyond the passion and the zeal is information, being educated, making sure you're clear on what you understand. Because I think if you can remember when you were young in your faith, you were just excited. You were just excited. Why are you
yeah,
excited? Jesus loves me. I'm excited. That's incredible. But when life really hits you
right,
and you go through your first pain point or things don't work out, and I think that issue of diligence and perseverance,
mm,
I think we have to demonstrate that specifically to the ones that are coming up next, because the world is so crazy. So I think believers, specifically Christian leaders, being able to demonstrate what it looks like to remain faithful when it's hard, like what it looks like to persevere. This is not the first time we've been under these conditions. This is not the church has always suffered. The church has always
Yeah.
been persecuted around the world. There's always been issues of what's truth and what's not. It looks different right now because the landscape is different, but these issues throughout human history have always existed. And so us as believers, as leaders, we have to be able to demonstrate that perseverance, because otherwise, my children and the ones that are behind them, if they don't see that this thing can't stand, the isms that exist in the culture today, then why would I give my youth to that? Right? Like, why
Sure.
would I give my energy to something that actually doesn't really stand up in the face of all the isms that we can all agree shouldn't be here? And so in my mind, we have to be able to demonstrate that faithfulness, that perseverance. And then also, what does it look like to not be liked in certain spaces?
Sure.
Because for all of us, we like the applause. We like to be, co-signed. We like to be high-fived. I think that's just human nature. I don't think there's anything wicked or evil about that. But I do believe we have to have a faith, and leaders specifically have to be able to say, well, beyond that, what if I say some things that will put me outside of the dominant popular experience of the day? And we have to show them what that looks like and to be okay with that. I
Yeah.
think the younger you learn that, the easier it will be for you, because you're going to have the responsibility of that burden for a long time.
Yeah, that's a good word. I think especially in a culture and society that sometimes can be highly influenced by what people think and what others say.
Yeah.
You can feel sometimes I'm not going to be able to express what I really think or who I really am because people might not like that.
Yeah.
You mentioned, you write in your article that a redefined leader must carry a profound burden to set the oppressed free. But many leaders today struggle with burnout, doubt, overwhelmed, asking themselves, am I good enough? Do I have what it takes? So how does embracing servant leadership speak into those struggles that many leaders face today?
Yeah. And I think I learned this probably earlier than, I didn't realize how significant this would have been if I didn't get this the
Mm,
earlier I got it. Because, especially if you come, depending on what your entry point into leadership is, I'm the oldest of six. So I've always, set the example. You
right.
gotta, do it, so I kind of always carried myself in that way, knowing that people are looking at me,
Mm-hmm.
if just my siblings. And then I think the sooner you get into having some responsibility for people that don't have your last name, then that's when you get to understand, like, okay, there's something different about how people respond to me
Yeah.
and how I respond to people, just simply because I'm the person in charge. I remember when I was in high school, we started this Christian club and this Bible study, and we started it. 10 people were there. By the end of the year, we had led over 1,200 kids to faith in Christ
Wow.
by this group of people. And, it was just these incredible things. But I remember in those moments when I'm 17 years old and having some responsibility, for these people, I wasn't a pastor, but I was just, I sensed that God wanted me to
Yeah.
do something for the school, or do something on my college campus, or be a part of what he was building. And so I think that there is this need to say, I have to be able to leverage what their interests are and put my interests down. And in doing that over and over again, by prioritizing their interests above mine, that's how I get the mechanism of, that's what leadership is. Leadership is not the one in charge. Leadership is not the one who's calling all the shots. That just means you got more consequences to your bad decisions when you're in leadership,
Right.
right? And so the earlier you learn that the core of leadership is service, and how that looks is I have to prefer them above myself, then that's where you can, from that point on, build off of that and scale that out to your family, or scale that out to the responsibilities you may have at different seasons of your life, different seasons of your leadership. And I think being able to know that is the paradigm, that's the framework of leadership, from that point on, I got to figure out, as I prefer others above myself, I'm not discarding myself, right?
Sure.
I need to be present. So, what do I need to do? How do I need to be in a space where I'm healthy? First time I went to therapy was I was 19 years old. I was working at the church. I was responsible for maybe 500 kids as a youth pastor, and I was, we worked from, you remember this, Virgil, but you kind of were of this ilk as well. You just worked. There was no day off. There was
Go.
no wellness. There was no,
Hmm.
and I was kind of saw myself as like a young OG. Like I was like, I was young, but I learned how this goes in this ministry world
Yeah.
from people that were seasoned, boomers that could go. And so that's what I thought it was. So I would work from 6:30 in the morning until 11:30 at night every day. There was no breaks. There was no days off. We were all doing it for the Lord, right? And I realized when I had burnout, I physically had burnout. My therapist was saying, "Hey, this is what it looks like to pace yourself. Do you take vacation? Do you have breaks? What do you do for fun? What are your hobbies? Right? Like
Yeah.
not reading books. What is your hobby? And those things I learned that my identity can't be in the role that I serve. And so I remember through some painful experiences earlier on in my leadership journey that this is not my identity. This is what I do. This isn't who I am. I'm graced to do this for a period of my life, and my time is going to come and go. And so I think there's a healthy detachment that needs to come with that
Sure.
once you understand that dynamic of identity for sure. And then from there, like, what do I do with the rest of my day? And so my wife and I, we kind of developed that ethos in our marriage, so around here on our staff, Sabbath days for us are Fridays, and everything that goes with Sabbath and wellness. I think that this audience is aware
Huge.
of.
Yeah.
We do mental wellness Mondays for our staff on the last Monday of every month. So we do that. We operate in margin. When I leave at 5, I'm not answering emails. I don't even look at my phone to check stuff out. That's very different than where I was at 20 years ago. You
Sure.
know what I mean? So through some pains of realizing, even in my service to people and God, I have to make sure that I'm loving myself well. And in loving myself well, that creates the margin to be able to build that rhythm in my life and in the life of my family, and then ultimately in the life of the role that I serve, in prioritizing other people's needs. And so that's kind of how that works out for us.
Yeah, that's good. I love that you touched on some of that because I think it's so easy to justify, oh, I'm going, I'm working, it's for the kingdom. But it's not okay if it's at the expense of our health, of our wellness, because that effectively eventually affects our effectiveness and affects our fruitfulness.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting because you have a unique perspective and a unique experience because you worked in ministry. I mean, even pastoring the areas that you were responsible for many years, and then you transitioned into the lead pastor role, succeeding your father-in-law, right? Tell me a little bit about just that, because you had a leadership journey, and I know I'm not my dad. I don't lead exactly like my dad, and
Right.
my style is not my dad's style.
Hmm.
What helped you in that process of kind of stepping into the role, but also feeling, man, I'm ready for this. The Lord is with me. My leaders and my pastors have poured into me, and I've been doing this. What helped you in that process of transition?
Yeah. So, I mean, I try to keep things like super, super simple because, when I first felt I was supposed to do this, and to say do this, like serve in God's church professionally, I
Hmm.
remember I was 17 years old, 16 years old. I'm at a prayer meeting at a friend's house. It was a bunch of students who were there, and I'm leaning up against the wall, and some kids had been praying for each other, and just very plainly, the way that I knew the Lord to speak to me in my own heart, He just spoke to me and He said, "You're going to pastor." I wanted to be a basketball player. I wanted to be a fashion designer. I wanted to I had zero interest in doing that. Not that I was against it. It just, I
Sure.
didn't think I could do it well. You know what I mean? There's nothing, I love church, but you know, I couldn't do what that person is doing.
Right.
You know what I mean? And, from that point on, I remember I said, Lord, I'll do whatever you want me to do, and every step from that point, that was 27 years ago, I just tried to say, Lord, I'll do whatever you want me to do, to the simplicity of how I experienced you when you first called me into this. Now, those effects and parameters have grown, and the scale of those things has changed. But this posture of I'll do whatever you want me to do has helped me simplify some very complicated dynamics, in leadership, specifically when you're talking about succession or leading with family. I mean, you can imagine,
Yep.
everything that comes with that. Leading young and being younger than everybody else at the table, um, having a different vision and perspective than maybe what has been before. So it's interesting. Like, I came to faith in the church that I'm in, right,
Mm-hmm,
as a
mm-hmm.
teenager, but my cultural upbringing, my father is Jamaican and my mother is Mexican, and we were moved around because we were a military family. And so some of the isms and the traditions that were a big deal in the part of the country where we were going to church at, I didn't have those issues just because culturally that
Right.
wasn't my hang up. So, I always saw myself as like an inside outsider. You know what I mean? I love the house of God. But I had friends who we played basketball together, or guys that I know who were in the music industry, or people who I knew who were designers. And I was always trying to make sure that what I was doing made sense to them. And
Mm-hmm.
and so in doing that, obviously the style and preferences and all of those things evolved differently over the years. And when I was much younger in ministry, like, I thought it was just like everybody's going to like this because this is reaching these people who don't
Right.
come to church. So I mean, I can tell you stories upon stories. And I mean, we had a shootout one time at one of our youth events because we had 2,000 kids show up for a venue that was only 300 people. You know what I mean? And all these, because the net was so wide, right, that we weren't ready for that. We
Yeah.
needed bigger nets. And so for me, I've always tried to prioritize those that are outside to come inside. And that was never like a big deal for me. And so culture and faith have always intersected,
Mm-hmm.
and I think being able to see that, because I've seen that in my own family. I remember as a kid, my parents, we were praying for the GI Bill that at the time you couldn't pass that down to your kids, your military kids. You couldn't pass it down. So we're praying at 6 a.m., Lord, please work it out so the GI Bill can get passed for my mom and dad so that, I can get some of that money. It's interesting. It didn't happen until all six of us were out of school. But so the idea of faith and culture, they were always intertwined in my house. And so
Yeah.
taking that ethic, I didn't know that was a philosophy of ministry. I learned that later. So I think taking that into the world that I was in, a lot of times it was celebrated and sometimes there was conflict around it because there were just some of the traditions I just didn't even know existed. You know what I mean? And as I got a little older, a little wiser, I realized, this isn't a hill to die on. And then there were other hills that I'm like, this matters because people's lives are at stake, not just our reputation in the community. You know what I mean? And so I think for me, that was helpful. And I've just tried to do that along the way, even through the succession process, with dealing with, Bishop Macbeth, Courtney Macbeth. He's a world class leader. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so he's never put pressure on me to be anybody but me. I've always, he's always seen like, yo, we have some of the same values. Some things we're different in, and I was born in a different era. He was
Yeah.
born in a different era. So he's always, let me be me and let me do dumb stuff that didn't work and just said, go try it out. You know what I'm saying? Like, and then help guide me along the way. And so he and we worked really hard to not fight over and make a big deal out of things that are not the big deal. We talk about
Yeah.
principle and preferences. Is this a principle
That's good.
or is this just a preference, right? And so, to me, I have a burden for people that are not in. I got a burden for people that are creating culture. I got a burden for people that are making things happen in different parts of society, and I really want to make sure that we're there at the table. You know what I mean? And so for me, that looks different. You know what I mean? And so God's been faithful to that. as we've seen him do that over the years. But that just comes from that security that my predecessor gave me to just lean into that.
I love that. Shout out to Bishop Courtney McBath. Love him. He's the best. And I love the dynamic of being able to kind of receive instruction and guidance from the previous generation and the previous, past leaders. And then when the older generation entrusts and believes in and empowers the younger generation, there's something powerful about that. And then also just the concept of our leadership and our ministry has to touch the culture. I mean, the way that you express that, I think, is so important. It's so pertinent and relevant. Before we share with people how they can connect with you, I have one more question, one more thought I'd like you to touch on. You caution that without deep inner formation, leaders can drift into shallow or even tyrannical leadership. What practices do you believe are the most essential for cultivating integrity and character and commitment for leaders?
Yeah, this is so, I think I have a burden for it because I think there are so many things that are at stake right now for the people coming behind us because the cultural climate right now is if you're not stealing money, if you're not cheating on your spouse, if you're not doing things that are, most people will say that's crazy. Those people are almost rare, and there may be a lot of reasons why that is, what I mean? And so, but I just know, like, I don't think anybody starts out like that. I didn't start out like that. So how did I get here? How did I get here in my own life? Like, how have I drifted, and the responsibility of ministry and the responsibility of leading people should never override your responsibility in your heart for God and for your need for God.
Yeah.
And I think we know that, we teach it, we talk about it. And so the disciplines, obviously, the spiritual disciplines are huge for that.
Yeah.
A life of prayer, a life of fasting, like on a regular basis.
Right.
Fasting. I almost, it's weird because these things almost sound archaic, but these are the things that have kept me. You know what I mean? In my 20s, kept me in my 20s, kept me in my 30s, are keeping me right now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to show these things to my children, and so I don't think Jesus requires us to not have our struggles and not have the thorn, that Paul talks about, whatever that may be for each of us. But I do believe he wants us to trust him with it to help us do the work that's necessary so that it doesn't become the thing that destroys us. And so obviously, a life of prayer. I was shocked, and I'll be honest, like, because some of this I'm still new to, you know what I mean? Because I was shocked to know that like 90% of pastors are only praying to get a message together. I think that's crazy because how crazy it is out here in the world, because we have to be able to hear something that is different than all the noise. I'm not even necessarily saying the quantity of your time, but the quality, I think, is important. When I'm not experiencing that in my own life, like, man, I got to shake some things up. You know what I mean? That life of fasting, like serious commitment to the word, that has nothing to do with our message prep.
Right.
I think being saturated with that. I read a lot of different things, like most of our audience. So I'm a believer that leaders should be well read, and that volume should be heavy. You should be reading a bunch of different things, including the Word of God.
Yeah.
But then also, like, intentionally having people in your life who can tell you about your mud and get in there with you. So for me, beyond my wife, and I got a group of friends that are always checking on me. There's scheduled time, like on the first Wednesday of every month at 10:30, I'm meeting with my brother Bobby, who's also a pastor, and we're just saying, yo, how are you doing with your eyes? How are you doing with are you fatigued? Are you working out? How's your eating regimens going? How are you and your spouse? How are you and your wife? Like, it's that sort of intentional
Accountability.
stuff. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? That I'm hoping, when I get off, I actually have a pathway to get back on. And when I'm slipping, I notice that there's something that's getting me back. And then, something else that's really important as well. I mean, again, this is kind of, it kind of sounds like obvious, but what are you listening to? Like what's the stuff that you're taking in? Like I said, I believe we should be culturally astute and we should know the times and all of that. But are you taking in things that are building you up, that are edifying you?
Right.
Do you have friends? Like, this is really important. Like, do you have friends like on a regular basis? The thing that I have learned about a bunch of leaders is like a lot of them don't have good friends,
Isolated.
and
Yeah.
they're isolated, and like people wanting something from you, as important as we are, right? We don't need to take ourselves too serious. So, when you're going to the grocery store or you're going out, you're sure you may run into somebody who's one of your partners, one of your congregation, somebody that knows you. They saw you on a podcast, and that's fine. But don't become a weirdo to where you don't go to the grocery store anymore. You don't do those things that are normal
Yeah.
for people. I think when we start getting weird when we stop doing normal
Right.
things, and I think we have to watch that. There's a group of our friends. One of my brothers, Terrence, who's there in South Florida. And we have this thing amongst all of us. We say, yo, if you notice a red flag, punch me in my chest. And so if we start acting weird, you have free flow to punch me in my chest without saying anything. And my hope is that we live that way, so that when we stand before people, when we're having conversations like this, people can actually believe what we're saying, because we have the integrity to back it.
Yeah.
We're one. We're integrous. We're not divided. And when that split starts to happen, we got the tools in place to restore us.
Yeah, that's good. What a great conversation, Pastor David. I think it's important to have conversations like these, and it's important to talk about everything, because as leaders, we want to finish the race strong, as Paul writes in the New Testament. I'd love for our AVAIL audience to just lean in and get to know more about you. How can they connect with you? How can they follow you? How can they know what's going on with David Osborne?
Yeah, so you can check me out on Instagram. It's at David E. Osborne, Osborne. And there I got all my stuff. Like I said, I have a fashion brand. It's called Bakar Collection. And that's one of my outlets and one of the things that I use to kind of put out there in the culture. We got some really cool things happen with that. It's Bakar, BACHAR collection.com. And then you can just track with us if you're interested in checking us out. Some of the things that we got to say at our church at Calvary Revival Church. Everything's up there. We have it on our YouTube, crcglobal.org. But, I think if you track with us, and there's a lot of different things that some people will be able to take from to be able to learn what we're about and how we're living this ethos out that we talked about today.
That's cool. There it is, everybody. David E. Osborne on Instagram, crcglobal.org for the website of the church. And check out Bakar Collection. I like that. That's good. That's a good thing. I want to mention to all our viewers and listeners, if you're not yet subscribed to the AVAIL Journal, what are you waiting for? You can try our free trial subscription of the AVAIL Journal, where you're going to get this AVAIL Journal, which has great content, looks good, feels good. Honestly, some of the best leadership content, including content from Pastor David Osborne. We want to get that in your hands. So availjournal.com. Pastor David, this has been awesome. What's the last thought or a final nugget you want to leave us with today?
And just something that has messed me up over these last 2 months. I can't get away from it, even in the teaching that we're doing right now. That God's grace is better than anything that we have ever experienced. And the grace of God and his favor towards us goes beyond any of our mistakes and our failures and everybody else's failures that we know. I think when we believe that and we live that way, we lead that way, we love people that way, it's amazing what God can do when people are truly gracious and we believe in that grace that has changed us.
That's a good word. Drop the mic. Great word. Pastor David, this has been a fun conversation. I want to mention on behalf of the AVAIL team, Dr. Chand, Martine, everybody from behind the scenes, we honor you, brother. We bless you. We're thankful that you're part of this tribe, and we love hearing your voice. and we're rooting for you. You've gotten 1 year in, and there's many, many years to go, but we're really proud of you, brother.
Thank you, man. I love you guys. Thank you all so much. And I appreciate the AVAIL team for giving me the opportunity to pour into this community. Thank you so much, Pastor Virgil. I love you, man. Thank you for all that you're doing.
Yes, sir. God bless you. And everybody lean in. Pastor David Osborne, great leader. He's got a lot to say, and has got a lot the Lord's put in him. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the AVAIL Podcast. For more leadership resources, check us out at theartofleadership.com. And remember to make sure to claim your free trial subscription of the AVAIL Journal at availjournal.com. As always, I'm your AVAIL Podcast host, Virgil Sierra. Muchas gracias. Thank you for connecting with us to learn the art of leadership here at the AVAIL Podcast.